And welcome to tonight's Red Barn event. My name is Virginia, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Community Programs Educator here at Wenatchee River Institute. With us tonight are also Joshua Schaub, our Community Programs Manager, making sure that people back home can see our presentation tonight. And big thanks to Lissy for being here as well. Show of hands, is this anybody's first time attending a Wenatchee River Institute program?
No.
We have a whole bunch of people here who've been to a lot of programs before. But we are a nonprofit with a mission to connect people, communities, and the natural world. Wenatchee River Institute works towards our mission through our youth programs that deliver curricula throughout the Wenatchee Valley and up and down the Columbia River. And through our community programs, such as those coming up in just a couple days, we have Birding by the River. We have our 4th annual Trash and Show coming up at the end of this week, and Spring Saunters Nature Walks, among many other programs. Another aspect of Wenatchee River Institute is our effort to connect Indigenous peoples to their ancestral homelands. I would like to take a moment for our land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement was created alongside the Shimpish-Squashu people. We are spreading the message they wish to be spread to the public. The land Wenatchee River Institute sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shimpish-Squashu, Pisquosa, or Wenatchee people. The Shimpish-Squashu, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River and surrounding areas. Sorry about that one. Their ancestral homeland extends from the Cascade Ridge throughout what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan Valleys. The culture and economy of the Shimpish-Squashu people centers on taking care of the land. They fish, hunt, gather roots and berries, basket-making materials, and medicines. The Shimpish-Squashu are named within the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Shimpish-Squashu now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. They were forced off their land here, and the U.S. government moved them to this reservation. The Shimpish-Squashu people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture, harvest their traditional foods and medicines, and hold their ceremonies passed down from their ancestors. Most people won't see or notice them, but they continue to be on the land they are connected to. Their traditional language is in Inhamchin, an interior Salish dialect, and we would like to welcome you all tonight by saying hello in their language, Tilhusht. We offer this land acknowledgement as the first step to amplifying Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We stand as an ally to recognize their connection to the land and their rights to practice their culture on these sacred lands. We encourage all to learn about the Indigenous peoples of the place you now call home. The Wenatchee River Institute is committed to sharing this land acknowledgement and following up with other actions to educate and be respectful. Thank you. I would also like to thank our sponsors. We have many sponsors, but we do also rely on our community. So some of our sponsors for our 2025 Red Barn events are the North Central Washington Audubon Society, Sleeping Lady Mountain Resort, Ludwig's German Restaurant, Leavenworth KOA, Overtall Inn, Rhine House, South Restaurants, Leavenworth Outdoor Center, Orion River Rafting, Icicle Brewing Company, Munchen House, Leavenworth Chamber of Commerce, and Syndicate Smith. And now to introduce our speaker. Kirk, who loves science and nature, has always enjoyed watching wildlife. But 3 years ago, after taking a tracking class at WRI, he started learning more about tracking animals. Last September, during another tracking workshop in Vantage, he found out about a chance to go to Namibia with a small group to meet the best trackers in the world, the San Bushmen. A month and a half later, he was sleeping in a half-finished grass hut in the Kalahari Desert, listening to elephants and hyenas at night. During the day, he followed San hunters as they tracked animals like kudu, oryx, and other antelope, and saw tracks of leopards and cheetahs. In the winter, Kirk helps Conservation Northwest with their wildlife tracking project near Snoqualmie Pass. So let's welcome Kirk. Woohoo! And let me reset your presentation real quick here. All righty.
All right.
It's all yours.
Thank you very much. So tracking with the Kalahari, the San Bushmen, so they're actually not called the San Bushmen. It's actually kind of a derogatory term. So you ready to try it out? So they actually have 4 clicks in their language. One is like that. The other is off the side of your tongue. And one is kind of snapping your tongue down. And one I can't do, it starts in the back of your tongue, or back of your mouth. So this one, Tatsi.
Wow.
I'm not going to pretend I can do that. Exactly, that's right. So I'm going to kind of give you a little bit about the journey over there and a little bit about their history and the life they have now and about their world-class tracking they do and how I bring that back here to Central Washington. So when I started putting this together, I first thought the story began last September, but the more I thought about it, it really started a long time ago. Back in the 80s, I was taking pictures of wolf tracks. I was living in a cabin in Alaska, and a pack of wolves would come through every few weeks. And I could tell, the picture on the left was pretty obvious what they were doing. That pack had come over there and peed on the stump. And you can probably come up with a guess of how many wolves were in this pack on the right and which one actually fell into the creek. And that was about the extent of my knowledge of tracking. I could tell they weren't snowshoe hares. I could maybe come up with some vague ideas, but unless it really slapped me in the face, I didn't really know what was going out in the woods when I was hiking. And so fast forward to 2022, March of 2022, almost exactly 3 years ago, I took an intro class here at WRI with Adam, and we spent about a day here inside, and he kind of used his whiteboard and stick figures, and then we spent the weekend out exploring the woods. And he just blew my mind. Showed us, he found bear claw marks on a tree, but then running up beside him were mouse tracks, deer, mice tracks going up the side of a ponderosa tree that big. It's like, how can you even find that? And animal behavior like bobcat, scat, and scrapes. And a bobcat will sit there and very rhythmically with his hind feet scrape, and then it may or may not poop, or it may or may not spray. It may just scrape, and it communicating with other wildlife. And so tracking I realized, wasn't just about finding a track. It was about really understanding what animals are out there in the woods we're traipsing through on our trails and what they're doing and what their home. We're in their home. So that really took me down this path, pun intended, of tracking. And I started buying field guides and gathering up some materials and going out on workshops. And so fast forward to last September, I was at a workshop, a tracking evaluation, which is basically a 2-day test of tracking skills with Marcus here. And he was the instructor. And he happened to mention, it's probably more than a happened, but he mentioned that he was going to be leading this trip to the Kalahari, which just sounded incredible. We're going to be camping with the San Bushmen. We're going to hang out there, follow their master trackers, the top trackers in the world. That was the good news. The bad news was it was in October, and this was September. So a little over a month later, I was throwing my sleeping pad down in the sands of the Kalahari in this half-finished grass hut missing the grass. And It was right next to the the San Bushmen tracking school. And that's the extent of the tracking school. It was just a rock shed to store stuff. And it had to be a rock shed. There was a well, but it was surrounded by rocks too. Otherwise, the elephants will tear it all up. But that was just their storage shed. And this tracking school and the evaluation I was at in Vantage was all part of this program called Cyber Tracker. And the Cyber Tracker is an international tracking certification program that started right there in the Kalahari with these San Bushmen and for these San Bushmen. So it was, they had been living their hunter-tracker traditional life until the late 1950s. And then, this is gonna sound really familiar, then they were told they could not hunt anymore. Their lands were taken away because they were not using them. And they were designated to be in certain areas and told they had to become farmers. So literally their tracking skills were dying off as the older people were dying. And a biologist named Louis Liebenberg from South Africa had been living with them and learning from them and working with them since starting in the 1980s. And he saw them literally dying off with the skills of these bush skills. And so he started this cyber tracker, which is kind of a weird term, but it's because they would use Palm Pilots basically to record tracks. And that's why it's called Cyber Tracker. But he created this certification program, one, to rebuild those skills, but also to actually provide certification for them, because just because you're a San Bushman doesn't mean you know how to track. You have to be taught. And so he was teaching them, the master trackers were teaching them, and then they got certified and then actually could get jobs. One of the guys we was with had just come back from Angola. National Geographic had hired him to track one elephant out of hundreds, because that one elephant had been killing people and they wanted to document it. But anyway, so this whole program, this trip I was on, was providing support for this tracking school and for the San Bushmen there. So in October, I jumped on a plane in Wenatchee, headed over to Seattle, had like a 6-hour layover in Seattle, then flew to Germany for another 6-hour layover, flew down to South Africa to Johannesburg for another 6-hour layover. And everything was going really good. It was all good news. All the flights were on time. And so I waited to get to Namibia, and the bad news was my luggage was still in Seattle. But you know, who needs luggage for a 3-week camping trip? So, and so a few hours later, I landed in Windhoek, which is the capital of Namibia, and without my luggage. But I had my backpack. The good news was I've traveled enough to know to carry your essentials in your day pack. So I had my sleeping bag, my battery pack, my camera, and my solar charger. So what else do you need for a 3-week camping trip? So this was an organized trip. Wouldn't call it really it definitely was not a tour. We were just all organized together and camping together, hanging out together. So from Windhoek, so I met up with those folks in Windhoek, and then in Windhoek we drove north for a couple of days on really nice paved road, and they were pretty easy days of driving. Got about here, and we headed east. And once we headed east, then we had not paved road. We had about half a day of driving on the gravel road, really entering into the Kalahari. So, you know, I really had to check out the sands of the Kalahari there. Really cool sand. Make a great place to put sea tracks too. So, and we were headed to this village called Snoqualmie, which is right on the border of Botswana and pretty close to Angola. It's actually, if you know the movie Gods Must Be Crazy, this is actually where it was filmed. The star was actually working in a kitchen when they found him. He was actually working in a kitchen in Snoqualmie. Some of the people we were with were actually in the movie. But anyway, from Snoqualmie, which is, there's a little store there, that's all that's in Snoqualmie. Well, there's a school too. But then we headed north on D 3315, and we were going to be camping out here, so headed on up this another gravel road, and then we turned off that gravel road onto a dirt path for 20 or 30 minutes and headed down through literally the heart of the Kalahari until we could get to our camp. You can see this tree right here has been pretty decimated by elephants. And once we got off the main road, then we jumped up on top so we'd have a nice view. And then we entered camp. And there were no hills, so one of the participants brought a drone, so this was actually a drone video. So this was home for the next week and a half, and in the middle of the Kalahari. So you can imagine the San Bushmen and us. There was about 15 of us, about 30 of them, two completely different cultures coming together in the middle of nowhere. It was a bit awkward for a while, but we had lots of games and we had music. And this is the way with that bow, they actually do play that as an instrument, like that. They stick it inside their mouth, which is pretty cool. And so we had lots of different ways to kind of get us together. One of those team bonding, community bonding was to finish the grass hut. So they had actually come out there. This was not their village. It was by that tracking school and specifically set for us all to come together and camp here. But they left this one grass hut for us to finish, so they would teach us how to finish it. So first we had to go collect the grass, and we had to know which grass to get and how to collect it correctly. So we went out with them and did that. And then they taught us how to actually put the grass in correctly, how to bundle it up. And so it was a really cool kind of team building experience, not to mention finishing the grass hut. And everything was coming from the bush. Even the cordage that ties it all together was collected and made right there on the spot, which you can see here in just a second. But she's tying that together inside the hut. And first we actually had to prepare it. And so we'd collected those, they called it mother-in-law's plant. So we pound it all out until it's nice and shredded, and then she would tie it all together, or we would tie it all together. And that's the actual cordage you can see there. So pretty cool. But the trip really was, at least for me, it was a cultural experience, but also a tracking experience. So every day, some of us would go out tracking, and so we would head out from camp. And in this particular day, we were going to head all the way over here. So I want to kind of give you an experience of what that's like. And this is called a pan, which is basically a dried up lake bed. We were there in the dry season. Hadn't rained in like 9 months. We were at the end of the dry season. We actually we're in some of the first rains for the rainy season. But we were headed over to this pan and then drive across the pan, which is a kind of crazy sort of a place. Once we get to where we're going to hunt, then the hunters would get out and start spreading out looking for animal sign. And once they found fresh tracks, they had to be fresh enough for us to hunt them, because they really were going to hunt them, and they used poison arrows. They would point it out, and we'd head on down single file. And we were just started here, and they pointed out this tree right here that's broken off. And they said, oh, that's an elephant did that. And then I don't know if we asked them or they just said, I think I asked them and said, when was that? And he said, looked at it, said, not very long ago, just this morning. It's like, how do you know that? So it's 90 degrees outside, and it was broken off, and the leaves weren't wilted yet. So it's like, of course, that makes perfect sense. But their degree of observation is really amazing. It wasn't long, and then we did see signs of those elephants. So this is my foot. In fact, it's this shoe. And here's one elephant track and another elephant track, and on more down. And over here, you can kind of see the toes of this elephant. But if you look close, what's inside of that elephant track? A lizard. The elephant had stepped on this lizard. This is how recent it was. The lizard was still alive, barely. But it was recent enough that the lizard was still alive and had been stepped on by the elephant. And some of the sign is a little more obvious, okay? So lots of elephant sign everywhere. They really actually kind of do, I don't know if damage is the right word, but really do a lot of destruction on the trees. And that may be good ecologically, I don't know. And some of the sign is also very obvious. This is a buffalo, or an elephant wallow. This is a dry season, so it's all dried up mud, but in the wet season, it would be all wet mud, and they will roll around in there. Some of the signs not quite as obvious. So what looks like bark is actually mud from the elephants, dried mud from the rainy season where the elephant had been covered in mud rolling around in the wallow, and then it comes and rubs on the tree. And over here, there's no mud, but the tree's actually been polished by the elephants. And even a novice like me, I could tell the difference between mom and baby's poop. And if all else fails and you're kind of bored, you can always play hacky sack with some elephant poop. Not many places you get to do that.
I don't really want to hit it.
Some people aren't too good. But then we'd head on down the trail. So this was our main hunter we'd follow. But there'd usually be 3 or 4 of them in front. We had 4 interpreters. There were several San Bushmen there who spoke English. And so we always had one of them right in front of us and one behind us in case there was an issue. They could direct us where to go. But we always keep running across more tracks. So this track, this is my foot again. Notice this foot, this toe, and this toe, and that claw. This ruler is about 4 inches long. And to give you more of a clue of who this might be, here's a track. There's a track right here. And there's a track right here. So she was laying down to show the stride of this animal. So this is 1 foot, and this is the same foot. Any ideas?
Is it a typer?
I'm sorry?
A taper, a typer?
Oh, good thought. No. Ostrich. That's an ostrich. But then we'd head on down the trail again, and this is kind of what it was like. Bopping through the bush to the Kalahari. Everything was dormant because we were in the dry season, and everything had thorns, so you had to kind of watch out. It is like 95 degrees, and they're all bundled up. And every once in a while, they would spot something, and so they would signal for us to hang back, and then they would sneak forward and stalk whatever they were. So notice the guy in the green shirt, how careful he is with his arrow, because the tip of it is poison, has poison on it, which is if they scratch themselves, it will probably kill them. So they're extremely dangerous. In this case, they were actually shooting it. They ran across, saw some birds, like they're called francolins, they're about the size of a chicken. And so they missed them. And if you watch the guy in the green, they have similar gestures as us. It's like, what?
So they could eat a bird that
They can eat it even if it has the poison. I don't know how that works, but yes, because one of the things about their tracking skills, why they became so well developed, they have to track the animal to shoot it, but then they shoot it with an arrow. And if you shoot an antelope that's the size of a moose, and some of their antelopes are the size of a moose, it may take several days for the poison to kill it, and they have to track that specific animal for could be several days. So that's part of the reason they really developed their tracking skills. But yeah, they can eat the meat when it's been shot with the poison, and yeah, I don't know how that works. And then we'd hit the trail again. And so sometimes we'd just be kind of wandering, looking for tracks. Once they'd found a fresh track, we would definitely follow that track. Find lots of animal sign around. So tracking's not just about the animals themselves. Their skills of interpretation is amazing. So you can see maybe you can't see this jawbone, but there's jawbones here, lower jawbones from a antelope, and there's like a dozen different kinds of antelopes over there. And so they said, oh, looks like probably a leopard killed it. Okay. So you can't tell obviously from the picture, but this tree, there's a big limb coming out over us this way. Said if it would have been hyena, the jaws wouldn't even still be there. A cheetah is going to kill something out in the open. Probably a leopard caught it, drug it up in the tree, ate on top of that limb, and the jawbones dropped off. And other stuff was either drug off or left. So that was their interpretation. And speaking of leopards in the tree. So then we ran across another carcass, more of a carcass. And of course, what happened here? And so we asked them, and they said, probably a cheetah. It's like, okay, so why do you think cheetah? And they said, well, it's out in the open. If it was a leopard, that would have taken it to a tree. Leopards kill them out in the open. Leopards aren't very strong, so they don't really eat up all the bones. They don't have big jaws or anything like that. If it's a hyena, which has big jaws, it's just there wouldn't be anything left. And cheetahs are built for speed. They're not big, strong animals. And so probably killed it out here in the open. And there was some other evidence they had, but I don't remember what that was. But, and so we kept following this fresh antelope tracks, and they stopped. They waved us back, or signals for us to stop, and stalked it. And then when they got up to this point, then they waved us forward. They said the antelope's gone, showed us the bed where the antelope had been, and then the track where it had taken off when we spooked it. And there are more tracks where you could see it really was running away. It wasn't just, so yeah, their skills is just incredible. And then there's just always just amazing things to look at. So these are weaver birds, they're called. So, and if all else fails, you can stop and take a little break. And so they always carry fire sticks in their quiver. Have you ever tried this? You never know when you might need a fire in the desert when it's 95 degrees.
Right.
He's going, yeah. Have you ever tried this?
I've tried it.
Yeah.
No, so he's trying to.
So they always carry them in their quiver. You're welcome to try. But the best part here is at the end of what he does with the fire. And if you time it, it's just slightly over a minute. Took him a little over a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can see the coal there in a second, glowing.
Didn't see that one coming.
I can get smoked sometimes, but that's as far as I can get. All right.
That was funny.
Oh,
yeah.
So we spent a lot of time, yeah, you can definitely smell it. Yeah. I keep practicing trying to get a spark. All I get is smoke. So, but we spent a lot of time in camp, playing games, dancing, singing. They really have jump rope down to art and science. They really like their jump rope. It's quite the event.
Is it rope they made out of?
You know, that's a good question. I never actually looked at the rope closely. I don't.
Lines they twined or something?
Yeah, I don't. That's a good question. Yeah. But that was lots of fun. But it really helped build us all as a community, as we called it, creating one village.
How often do those people welcome?
About once a year or so. So this trip I was on, it is specifically to provide support for them, as well as a cultural exchange. And so it provides support both financially, and we also bring, because they're paid to guide us. They have nothing. We actually cook dinner every night. We brought all the food for everybody, for us and them. So we didn't get to eat any good, cool bush foods. I was hoping to, but we ate lentils and.
How many people were in that little village?
So there was about 30 or 40 of them and about 15 to 20 of us. But yeah, we'd cook dinner. We'd usually serve dinner. They would help us cook and serve. And then at night we would have big bonfires and sing or dance or.
You could speak English, all of them?
There was about 4 interpreters, and a few others that spoke a little bit here and there. And so we would have, I think in this picture, we were having a elder circle, and so the elders were telling stories, and which was really funny because this guy was starting to tell a story, and then other people disagreed with his version, and so they would jump in. And then I don't know if it was an argument, but it seemed like an argument back and forth about what was the right version of the story. And the interpreter never interpreted because, how can you interpret? But it was fun. He actually is the guy who made this. He actually died in December, right after we left. So we had the opportunity to have a tracking evaluation like they have, as well as the one that we had in Vantage. And when you don't know the animals, you don't expect to do well. Over here, you see an ungulate track, and it's a deer or an elk. There's like a dozen different ones, and some of them, they range in size from a little dog size to moose size. And some of them are all, there's a number of them that are elk to moose size, so their tracks all look the same to me, to them. The guy here, he was a master tracker. He's the one that had just come back from Angola, hired by National Geographic. And we were looking at one of the tracks, and we asked him, so how can you tell it's this and not that? And he said, well, it's obvious. And then he laughed, and it went into lots of explanation and detail. But it was. I had bought the tracking guide for that area, but I still didn't know most of the animals. So, some of the question. Normally, the question would be, whose track is this? Who made this track? And this was a question of who made this track. We all laughed. It's like, maybe the question should be, can you find the track? And that's what we're looking at here. It's like, where is it? But But yeah, at the end of the day, you're walking across the pan in the Kalahari and into the sunset with these master trackers who are just amazing people, and it's just awesome. So they also showed us a bunch of their traditional skills. They wanted to tan a hide and show us how they tan a hide, and to do that, they use a root from a particular plant. So we took off with some of the ladies and some of the men looking for these plants, but the plants don't have any leaves right now because they're all dormant. And so they would just every once in a while stop and start digging, and we couldn't figure out how they knew, but they would look for these little dried up leaves that looked like everything else, and they knew that was the plant. And so they would start digging, and this would be what they would use then to tan the hide. But they would just start digging with what they call a digging stick, which is just flattened on the end. It actually works a lot better than a shovel in this kind of situation. And then they would pull out the tuber. And after we'd collected a number of them, then we headed on back to camp with them. And they smashed them all up and stuffed them into this, put them into this hide, smeared it all over the hide, rolled the hide up, and let it sit for a few hours. And then cleaned it off, and then we started working it until it dried and was nice and flexible tanned hide. And it didn't take long in 90-something degree heat in the desert to dry. They were going to show us how they make their bow and arrows. And so we went out with some of the guys, and they were looking for one particular type of plant, bush, and then saw what they were wanting, cut that off, and then we went back to camp, and they started cleaning that up. And while they're doing all that, there's still lots of other activity going on in camp. So it was just always this big bundle of activity and energy going on. To make the arrows are actually made from fencing wire. The arrow tip. And they just forge it out. And then the bowstring,
Probably not.
the bowstring is made from sinew, antelope tendon. And this guy was making that on the spot as well. And then he would finish it off, tie it all back together. And it didn't take half a day. They can shoot a ways. It should be a little tighter than that, but the arrow does not.
Yeah, there's no.
It's not going to kill the animal. What kills the animal? So they don't need to hit it hard. They just need to hit it.
Oh.
And so you don't have to be shooting it, a really long way. But they can shoot 100 yards or so. But all you have to do is stab it in the animal. You're not trying to kill it with an arrow like we do here. So.
Oh, lovely.
And so to make the shaft of the arrow is actually grass. So this is a stiffer kind of reed type grass, and it's hollow. And then this is a smaller piece of grass that's hollow, and there's the tip of the arrow point. It slides down in there, and then this slides down in there. What he's doing here is making glue. So there is two kinds of sap. And so what he's doing is licking the sap and dampening it. And then he rubs it on the outside of this, so he slides it down and it glues it together. And so they carry all that in their quiver. So if you break an arrow, lose an arrow, you just make a new one. As long as you have a point. Yeah. So they didn't do anything with poison for us. Their arrows had poison in them, but they showed us this particular bug or beetle lives on one specific plant, and then it lays its eggs. The eggs fall down in the ground. The larvae burrows down several feet and creates the larvae or pupa and starts growing, and they dig it up, and then it is poisonous, and they just squeeze it out onto there and smear it onto their arrow tip. But if you have it on a cut, it'll probably kill you. So they're really careful with their arrows. They didn't let us handle any with poison. These don't have poison, by the way. And if they have poison on them, the points goes down into the quiver, and if they don't have poison, then they're pointed up. And the poison will last for a really long time. To a certain degree, that's kind of, I don't know if myth is the right word, but they're really caught in these two worlds. They aren't in that hunter-gatherer society anymore or culture anymore. They don't have enough land where they can actually hunt. They're told what they can hunt and when they can hunt. So in this case, in these pictures, we were tracking, and they found some kudu tracks, which is a type of antelope, about an elk-sized antelope. And so the guy on the right is up on a termite mound looking at it. He can see it off under the trees. But their permit that they have doesn't have kudu listed. So they pull out their cell phone. So we're standing in the middle of the Kalahari, in the middle of nowhere, with poison arrows, and talking on a cell phone, calling to see if he can get permission to hunt a kudu.
Wow.
It's this really odd and sad situation.
Well, you can see their clothes too, obviously.
And their clothes are probably from thrift stores from the US or Europe that nobody wanted here, and they were sit there and they get them for either for free or for next to nothing. Yes. So again, this trip I was on was this providing support for them and their villages in a number of ways, and one of those is to provide help with their farms, their small gardens. And so one day we went back into Snoqualmie, and then went out to some of the villages. So this is Snoqualmie. This is the town of Snoqualmie, or the edge of the town. And then we went out to some of their gardens, and they really do have some amazing gardens. And this is one of the actual villages. So these are their homes. And they have really awesome gardens. We're in the middle of the Kalahari. It hasn't rained in 11 months. And they have one water hose, and these are like peanut butter jars with holes in them, and so they run the water hose there, and then it waters each little patch one at a time. But they grow some incredible foods. So we actually took them some seeds and some new plants and trees and fruit trees. So they're very, very proud of their gardens, as they should be. And those gardens can be providing food for the whole village or just a family, but typically it's for a full village. Some of them, they produce enough food that then they're able to sell it to other people as well. This particular village, they used forest gardens, so they had fruit trees that provided shade, and then they had their vegetables under the fruit trees. And some people just watered by hand.
Where do they get their water from?
So they have a well. Each village had a well. And that's a whole another issue, because remember what I said at the tracking school? That they had a well there, but it was surrounded by rocks. So this village actually had a well, and it was destroyed by elephants. And then they rebuilt it, and then rebuilt it trying to protect it better.
So the elephants go for the water?
They go for the water, and yep, exactly. They smell that water, and then they go in and just try to get water.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but then,
We have problems keeping deer out of our
Yeah. Deer versus elephants, right? Yeah, you think about it. I mean, elephants are huge. So back at camp, our last night we spent dancing and singing and visiting.
How many days were you in that camp?
About a week and a half. Yeah. And had a nice farewell party that night. And then the next day, when we were getting ready to leave, then we had more dancing. And lots of tears and lots of hugs. It was a really, really emotional time to leave. We had really bonded really well. It was really tough. But we had it on, and one of the difficult things is we go and we have our adventure and leave, and we go on our cool little safari and see cool animals, and they're still in that life. They're not having an adventure. That is their life. But we went up to National Park, drove around, and had some fun. But some of those things I learned there as skills I bring back. I don't know if skills is the right word, but more of a frame of mind is trying to notice the wildlife here. When I go hiking, I really want to think about that, I'm walking through somebody's home, and what can I notice about their home, and what are they doing in there? And so one of the my hobbies is I set up trail cameras, and so this has really helped me. So I really look for, so I just kind of walk along, and if something hit me in the face, I would notice it. But now I specifically search out for stuff, for animal sign or for tracks, and it doesn't have to be just a track. And I really look for the details, and knowing something about how the animals behave really helps, and it all becomes a spiral. So if you notice this tree, as one instructor said, look for something that doesn't look like everything else, and that tree doesn't look like the other ponderosas. So what do you notice about that tree?
It's missing branches someplace.
Yeah, missing branches over here.
Or bent over.
This is actually broken at the top, and then obviously you can't go up close, but there used to be branches here, and there's little stobs sticking out where they were. There's teeth marks right here. Bears like to do that. And this tree is actually this tree. This looks smaller in that picture, but it's the same tree. So I actually took this picture Saturday. And so I set up, and this tree here, you can't see it real well in the picture, but this is rubbed off. There's claw marks up there. So it's like, bears like this spot. There was actually bear tracks over there. So I set up a trail camera to see what exactly they were doing here.
My dad used to do that.
But I only found that because I was specifically looking for things. And I wanted to capture a cougar on my cameras. And I'd seen some before, but I really wanted, and they'd always just kind of walking by. So I thought about how cougars act, what they like, and I wanted to be able to catch them doing something in front of the camera. And so I found a spot and set it up, and this was April 6th. So this is recent. And it just seemed like the spot that a cougar would want to go hang out, and it would have a nice overview. It's on a nice little narrow ridge. There's game trails around. And so I set my camera there based on what I thought, how a cougar behaves and its habitat. And remember that bobcat scrape at the beginning? So I found a bobcat scrape, and they will actually go and use it multiple times. So I thought that's a great place to put a camera, to be able to catch the bobcat coming up and doing a scrape. Now it ended up being a little more of an intimate view than I expected.
We got it for sure. No mistake.
Don't post that.
Bobcats, Facebook.
So I walk my dog up and down the trail at least almost every day, and sometimes twice a day down here at the river. And I'd never seen, and I've been doing that for like 4 years, and I've never seen a bird nest. And this January, when I was tracking with Conservation Northwest, a couple of the other people said, "Oh, there's a bird nest, there's a bird nest." It's like, oh my gosh, I've never seen that. And they were completely different kind of bird nests. So it's like, what am I missing? And so I got a bird nest field guide and started talking to people on a bird nest app. And now I start actively searching for bird nest. And these are all right down here. And there's two bird nests two crow nests right up here in these trees. And I went down Blackbird Island the other day on the trail closest to the highway, and I never really go that. There were 10 bird nests, and I was just walking my dog and just kind of looking around. It wasn't even it's like actively searching. It's amazing what's out there, and it shouldn't be surprising that there's lots of bird nests out there, but they're there. And kind of putting it all together, this behavior, actively searching and looking for details. The other day, this weekend, I was hiking along, and I saw a chipmunk run across the trail. It's like, why does a chipmunk cross the trail? Why does it go to the other side? And it ran over, jumped up on a log, and sat there for a few seconds, and then jumped off the log, went down in a hole. Saying, okay, well, that's his hiding spot. Why was he over there? And so I looked over there, thinking about what chipmunks do. He's got to be eating over there. There was a stump, and so I went over, and to that stump, it's like, that's a perfect place for a chipmunk to sit there and eat. And so I went over, and not that many people get excited about chipmunk poop. But this is two chipmunk turds. Here's one, and here's the other. This is an inch. And here's the seed it'd been eating. And here's part of the shell from the seed. But just that actively, and it's like, who cares? Except that tells me something about what's the wildlife doing out there in their home. It tells me that, where I visualize, I don't visualize the poop. I visualize the chipmunk sitting over there eating, or the cougar hanging out watching for deer, or the bobcat telling other bobcats it's around. So, but just actively really searching. So, number of lessons, thoughts for the trail. When we're out there hiking, really thinking about, you're going through maybe the indigenous version of people's, through their homes, and looking for their sign. What sign's out there? What are they doing? And how are they living their life? And that's what tracking can be. It's not just finding some track in the ground. And so we're really specifically looking for stuff, not just when it hits you in the face. Look closely for details, study the behavior, buy field guides, and workshops and clubs. There's actually a club outing over in Ellensburg Saturday for the Ellensburg Tracking Club. But then a completely different sort of take home is, what is the reality for indigenous peoples all over the world? They don't, this is their home. And we may have this romanticized view of their bows and arrows, which is real, and hunting and their tracking skills. But I don't even know what the question is or the answer, but where do they go from here? So questions?
What did they actually hunt or kill any animals?
They did not kill any while we were there. They did shoot at some, but they missed. Yeah. And stalked a bunch. We stalked a bunch. Yeah. But they were primarily just hunting antelope. But they only had a few species they were allowed to hunt.
Were they able to hunt the kudu?
Couldn't hunt the kudu. So they actually stalked it, and they got right up close enough to shoot it, but yeah, they couldn't shoot it. So. Yeah.
So are they subsistence, or are they getting assistance?
They are getting a lot of assistance. The unemployment there is about 90%. There are no jobs. There's not enough land that they're allowed to hunt on anymore for them to, they still do subsistence. The gardens are basically subsistence, but there's not really enough there for them to subsist on. They can't travel around and follow game like they used to. There used to not be the numbers of elephants, so the whole ecological system has changed due to multiple reasons, which I don't know. Partly colonialism, but a lot of the property's been turned into game farms, like or a national park. So there's 2 national parks. We went to one national park. They used to live and hunt in what is now the national park. That's not allowed. So yes, there's subsistence, but there's not really enough to subsist on. And so they get a lot of government assistance, or they're supposed to. Basically, they have nothing.
Is there enough water for them?
Apparently. So.
Wow, doesn't look like it.
No. Each village has a well. And historically, there would be not wells, but watering holes.
Yeah.
And they would tend to be around those watering holes.
Sure.
It looks like the soil is so poor that their gardens are so productive.
So, well, I don't know where that would be, but so one of the one of the village gardens, they actually, and I think you could see it in one of the pictures, they had like 4 garden lots, 4 plots. One of them they kept, so a lot of them have a few cows or sheep, or I guess more goats and cows than not sheep. And so they try to bring them in at night, so leopards and lions and cheetahs don't kill them, and hyenas. And so they'll lock them up into that lot. So what that farm does is actually rotates their lots around. So they'll, next year, or whatever, I don't know what the rotation time period is, they'll move their garden over to where they were keeping their livestock. So a lot of manure and organic matter in there, and so they rotate that way. So, but yeah, there's.
Elephant dung.
You know, that's a good question. Yeah, there is a lot. I don't know if they do or not. And it seems like that would be a good thing to do. You know, I don't know if they do. Yeah.
And are there jobs available in tourism with all of these?
So,
incredible
I mean,
skills?
basically, we were providing them jobs related to tourism, and there are some other tourism jobs out there. They have some of the villages, I can't think of the name, what they call it, but basically it's come live like a bushman sort of thing, basically what we were doing, but in specific spots. So there is some of that, but not a lot.
Closer to Windhoek?
The San aren't in Windhoek. That's not their area. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Namibia
It's a huge country.
is a huge country with and there is a lot of tourism there. And so that is one thing that's, can provide some. And part of the jobs for the tracking is for safaris, for hunting, trophy hunting, and then also for science tracking for biologists. So that's part of what this program and the tracking school is trying to provide jobs. So, and try to maintain that historic cultural importance and in a modern context. So, but how many there's not that many jobs to do that. So it's a really difficult situation. And obviously they're not a unique situation in terms of what's happened to indigenous peoples.
Very, very good.
Thank you. Thanks. It's an amazing, it's an amazing program. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Kirk, thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
has been wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
You bet.
And thanks for watching.